There she is. Good morning, Miss Megan.
How are you guys?
Well,
Almost the end of the month.
your favorite time of month.
It is. Your agents listen to you. So we don't have tons of closings at the end of the month. We get ours in the middle now because they're not scheduling them. So the end of last week and this week has been our end of the month. But it's nice because then while all of our other offices are busy at the end of the month, we're kind of calm. We don't have our closings. I wanted to or just let you guys know, thank you for all of your support. Wanted to let you know that we have a new customer service representative starting in our office tomorrow. She started yesterday in our Plant City office, and she's there today and yesterday for training. And then she'll be physically in our Apollo Beach office starting tomorrow. Her name is Jasmine. She's super sweet. Cannot wait to have add her to our team. So if you're in the Apollo Beach office, please stop by, say hi, welcome her with open arms. And then next Tuesday, I'll have her on camera. So those of you who are not in Apollo Beach can be able to see her and meet her. And then don't forget, our training in September is going to go over, what we do on our end from A to Z to get you closed. And then the next one after that is the CE credits. So I forgot to send out the link last week to Craig. I'll do that today. So you guys can start registering for the October CE credit class. It is 2 hours.
And you'll have to register on a separate link because it'll be taught by a licensed instructor.
Yes.
Cool. Some big news. I had dinner with Aaron last week, and it's very cool. Aaron runs a really good title company. The best, really. The tools, the systems, everything they have. And there was a big operation in Central Florida that got in trouble. And the regulators called Aaron and said, could you step in and take this one over? So he actually took over this title company, and it's big. So now we got a whole presence in Southern Florida that we can use, in Central Florida that we can do. I forgot the name of that company. Do you know it?
Yes, Celebration Title Group. So they have quite a few offices in Florida. Some are in Orlando. So the BE3 agents from Orlando, I know a lot of you guys want to be physically present for your closing, and that's why we've had, communication, but you don't want to use this because you don't want to drive to Apollo Beach. We now have an office close to you, so we can courtesy close you. And in Orlando, there are tons of offices. Very excited to have them on our team. We'll get to meet them in October during our employee seminar. I've met a couple of them briefly, and they're very wonderful. So I'm excited.
Yep. So that was a big deal for the regulators to come in and say, will you take over this company? So congratulations to that.
Yeah, it's awesome. Aaron is kicking butt out there, even from Texas.
Oh, really? Well, they're going to be figured out now. So anyway, thank you for sharing that news with us.
You are very welcome.
Okay. What are the two things? I'm asking a bunch of questions today. What are the two things that changed really in depth for us in the last 14 days? No compensation MLS, and you got to have a buyer broker agreement. Okay. And what's happened if you don't have those things? Fines, automatic fines. Chris and I were just talking this morning, and a local agent we know just put a post up on Facebook, Remax agent. And it was sad to say that, but yeah, they got fined for putting compensation in their MLS remarks. Right.
They tried to be a little slick with it and making insinuations as to the concessions and the compensation. And they got an immediate fine. And so there is no grace periods. If you're doing something wrong, you're getting a fine immediately. It goes directly to your email. So just as a shameless comment, you may want to contact Stellar MLS and make sure that the email that they have that they're communicating with is one that you check. Because a lot of the times when you signed on with the company, you had a different email. You didn't have a C21BE email, and it may not have been the one that got put with the MLS. So now's a good opportunity to check that because they're sending them directly to your emails. Your fine goes directly to an email. And if you're not checking that email, your MLS is going to get shut off if you got fined and didn't know it. So just pay attention to those things. Immediate fines. You can always appeal them, but that means you got to go in front of the board for your appeal.
Yeah, it's a waste of time. Just don't mess with compensation in the MLS. No, that's a big no-no, right? And we're going to talk about that when I get Sammy on in a minute. Yeah, no. How about if I try? No, don't try anything. Today's enlightened perspective is the more you focus on what you don't like, the more you see it everywhere and the more annoyed you get. All right. So is it time to just accept what's happening? I've had this conversation at least 3 times yesterday with agents. 90 days from now, we're going to look back and laugh and say, this was nothing. We'll be in the habit. It's going to be good. So just accept it now and we'll play on. Cool. Conversations with the back office. Okay. Samantha, are you mic'd up?
Yeah,
Hi.
Hi. Okay. So you are like front and center, the guard, which thank goodness. Yeah, she's great. Thank you very much. She's the guard. I don't know how some brokers are sleeping right now. When I think about Ruttenberg Realty with 2,200 agents that are not trained, oh, it's scary to me. And these La Rosa Realties, some of these big shots, oh my gosh, it's terrible. So Sammy's kind of our watchdog, and she's not there to be mean. She's there to cover your butt, right? So I wrote down, you need to file your BBAs in Dotloop. Create a contract loop with a buyer name, and it's going to ask you for an address, and just put zeros in there, right? So John, you're going to have a new loop set up for Craig Began's buyer, right? And that's going to be your loop. And in that loop, in your contract loop, is a spot for the BBA. Now we're putting the BBA in the loop. If you want to use a showing agreement, add a showing agreement. If you want to use a pre-touring agreement, add the pre-touring. It doesn't matter to us. You have to have one of the 3, right? We automatically put the BBA in because that's ideally the commitment that you want to have. But you may start off slower with a showing agreement or even a pre-touring agreement. But you have to have something in there, right? So Sammy is seeing contracts being turned in, but there's no BBA. So if we were subpoenaed or requested from the board, hey, send me a copy of your buyer broker agreement on this pending contract, and we don't have it, fine. We don't want to deal with that. All right. So you can rename it later once you find a property. And I wrote down EBBA, showing agreement or a pre-touring agreement. But the brokerage needs that form submitted, right? That's all you got to do. So whenever you need a buyer, get the agreement signed, create a loop for them. And you're going to start having a lot more loops. Because how long are buyers taking to mature through the process? 18 to 24 months you might be working that sucker. But what a great way to keep them in touch, right? As you show them things, you put their MLS remarks in there, things they like, things they don't like. It's like a storage file. Yeah. Well, you might take a BBA for 90 days and then update it with another BBA for another 90 days and just put it on top of the old one. But you're going to be in there. Okay. Sam, any more comments on that?
Yeah, I think the main thing is just be wary and be cautious of the forms that you're receiving from other brokerages. I call my dad and I'm like, I don't even know what this agent is thinking. They gave our agent this form and helped me decipher it.
Pull it up.
I don't know if I can share my screen. Okay, yeah, I can.
No kidding. We're not making this up. So it's incumbent upon you to read what other people are sending you. Okay.
Can you see this?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Seller agrees that broker shall offer compensation amount of 2.5% of the purchase price or $319,000 to a single agent. I'll take 319 too. That seller would be kind of upset if we took all of their proceeds and then gave them to the buyer's agent. Yeah. But an agent sent this form out from, oh, Ruttenberg Realty. Sorry. Was I excited about that? So they sent this to our agent. Now, let's not be mean or anything, but let's caution them. Hey,
We brought it to their attention because our agent paid attention, our transaction coordinator paid attention, brought it to the attention of the agent, and the agent was like, there's nothing wrong with that. Oh, I'm sorry. We ended up contracting at $315,000. Would you like me to change it to 315,000? Sure. Yeah, that's what we would like. No, I'd like you, and what we end up saying, I'd like you to reread the form, please. reread the sentence and just clarify what that actually means and what you put in there when you wrote in 315,000 and 15 minutes later, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. Can we correct that? Yes, please, let's correct it.
Yeah,
Alright.
I think what we talked about yesterday was if you're the listing agent receiving offers, you provide the compensation agreement. The buyer's agent is not providing one to you. There are ones that are doing that, but that's not the right process. So vice versa, if you're making an offer with your buyer, ask for the compensation agreement up front. But we're hearing that a lot of other brokerages are giving pushback on this and telling their agents not to provide a compensation agreement and to write it in the terms of the offer. So if you come across that, I'm gonna copy and paste my dad's clause in the chat that I want to see on your contracts.
Because there it is. Seller to credit buyer blank percent of the purchase price at closing for the purpose of compensating the buyer's broker, right? That's full transparency. So who pays the buyer broker? The buyer. Where'd the buyer get the money from? The seller. But the buyer's paying it. So it's just clear transparency is all we're trying to get to, right? So when you're in Dotloop in the clauses section up here, click clauses, start typing seller, and it can fill it out. Okay. So we were talking about this yesterday with the managers. The compensation agreement is an agreement between who? Careful, I'm going to trick you. It's between the listing brokerage and the selling brokerage, or between the seller and the selling brokerage. Right? You're looking confused. So
Well,
we don't know what procedure the listing broker is using. Right? What I've been reading is broker to broker compensation should be gone away with. So seller pays seller broker, buyer pays buyer broker is what most of the big guys are talking about. Right? So when we're asking for a compensation agreement for XYZ Realty, the listing brokerage, they're going to send us either seller pays listing broker or listing broker pays selling broker. I'm sorry, I did it wrong too. Seller pays buyer broker or listing brokerage pays buyer broker. One of those two is what you want to have. Now, if they're not giving you one, then you want to write your compensation into the contract. But if they gave you a compensation agreement, do you need to write into the contract? No.
That does actually hurt because you have a compensation agreement, like Craig said, between the seller and the buyer's broker. So now the seller has to pay the buyer's broker, let's say 3%. Now you go write it into the contract, which is an agreement between the seller and the buyer, a completely separate agreement that says the seller is going to give the buyer a credit to pay their buyer broker of 3%. So really the seller's on the hook for 6%. The buyer broker can only collect 3%, but the buyer is going to get a credit of 3% and the seller is going to pay the agent 3%. So yes, it could hurt our seller to have it both in the contract and on a compensation agreement because they're two separate agreements between completely different parties and they could construe something completely different.
And that could also affect our buyer if we have a compensation agreement and then we're adding additional terms in there to possibly confuse a seller and could possibly put us at a detriment because we're asking for more, even though we have something signed, letting us know what we're actually getting compensated already. And
let's add one more wrinkle. The seller's compensation agreement may or may not match what your BBA says. And how much are you allowed to collect? Only what the BBA says, right? So I'm not really worried about us, but when we're giving our buyer broker a compensation agreement with 3%, that doesn't mean our seller's paying 3%. The buyer's agent is only going to collect what they can collect. So it's going to become more incumbent on us to have conversations with the buyer's broker. Because David, if you give me an offer on my listing, and John, you give me an offer on my listing, and your BBA is only calling for 2%, but yours is calling for 3%, and they're identical offers, which one's higher net for my seller? John's, because he's only getting 2, or whatever I said. You're the 2, all right? So you really have to know that to come up with your net sheet for your seller now. But I'm from the government, and I'm here to help you make this simpler. Right. But once again, I read a Facebook post that somebody sent me yesterday. I didn't go on Facebook, but somebody sent me a thing. And it was a broker saying, I will never charge my buyers a commission. Even if the seller is offering no compensation, I'm not going to stand in the way of you buying your house. That's a choice. Yeah.
Yeah, but do you think he's bluffing because he knows that compensation is going to be offered?
Yes, I do.
It's a marketing ploy. Most times you're able to negotiate it or it's already being offered. So he's basically playing his cards that maybe 1 out of 100, he may not get anything because that 1 out of 100 wasn't offering and he couldn't negotiate it and they were standing firm. But the rest of them, there's going to be some offer of compensation or they'll be able to negotiate something in the way of terms.
But it boils down to professionalism to me, right? When you're sick and you go to the doctor, are you really concerned about what they're charging you? No, you want the best doctor for what the job is. So that's the person, in my opinion, to see a lot of value.
Well, I have a question. If we are including a compensation agreement with a purchase contract, do we check other under addendas and disclosures?
Nope.
I would say no.
So it's not a
because
part of the contract.
It's an agreement between two separate parties that aren't the buyer and the seller. So it shouldn't attach to the contract. It's a completely separate agreement between a seller and a buyer's broker or a listing broker and a buyer's broker. And the contract is between buyer and seller.
Right. But when you submit your contract to the title company, you want to submit your compensation agreement as well, so they know what's being offered. Now, you might want to include your buyer broker agreement that shows you're authorized to collect that much. So once again, we're here to make it simpler for you. So now you got 3 contracts to turn in. Compensation agreement.
Yeah, so they have to provide us this
So there's 2
compensation
forms.
agreement between the seller broker and the buyer's broker. No. You have a legally binding contract that says the listing broker is paying the seller's broker. There's no need to put it into the legally binding contract between the buyer and the seller because we already have a legally binding contract that says you're offering me that.
Did we ever put our commission in the purchase contract before this stuff? Why? Because the MLS was our universal offer of compensation. Your showing agreement now is your compensation agreement is your offer of compensation. So we never put it in there before. See, it is confusing. Correct. You're only putting it in the contract if they're not giving you a compensation agreement because we want to make sure our buyer is paid. We're going to ask for it anyway. It's a negotiation.
And there's something to it where don't just send a compensation agreement and a contract willy-nilly without conversations, because they could sign the contract and not the compensation agreement, and then you get no compensation.
Yeah, you don't know what you're getting.
Well, you're going to force your buyer to pay your
Right.
compensation based on your BBA and a contract that you wrote. So I wrote the contract and sent a compensation agreement because they didn't provide one. So I sent a compensation agreement and a contract. Contract doesn't reference commissions. The compensation agreement did because I decided to do it that way. If the seller accepts the offer but doesn't accept the terms that I'm presenting to him to pay me a commission, now we have a legally binding contract between the buyer and the seller, and my buyer is going to be obligated to pay my commission because the seller didn't agree to pay the commission in the compensation agreement. No, I will not agree to those terms, but I'll agree to these terms. And they're 2 separate contracts, so I'm allowed to do that. You just put your buyer on the hook for paying the full BBA commission. Well, that's
Ideally, you'd have that first.
that's the point, but not everybody is thinking clearly right now with the steps that they're taking. So I have a question. Is a listing agent allowed to ask you for your buyer brokerage agreement? Because this is the other thing we're seeing a lot of. Hey, are you offering compensation, Mr. Listing Agent? Yeah, I am, but send me your buyer broker agreement and I'll send you a compensation agreement that matches what you've negotiated with your buyer. Are they allowed to do that? No, they're allowed to ask for whatever the hell they want. But why would we give it?
Why
That
don't you say, show me
they
your
have,
listing agreement?
that is the response that you should give them. I will send you my buyer brokerage agreement when you send me your listing agreement. You have just as much right to that form as I have to your listing agreement. They're a legally binding contract between 2 parties that I am not one of. I have no right to that form. And the whole point was to have the sellers be able to negotiate commissions. And now the agent is trying to step in and we'll put in quotations, fix the commission before the seller can negotiate it by saying, no, send me that and that's what I'll give it to you at.
Mhm.
So, but they have every right to ask for it. You just have to be strong enough to say no and start negotiating it and then put it into the offer, because now that offer must be presented to the seller. If I put it into the offer because they won't give me a compensation agreement, write it into the additional terms with that verbiage, present it to the seller. They have to present it to the seller now.
And then there's a counter offer term. If the seller doesn't want to pay the 3% we filled in the blank, he can counter it too. And then we go to our buyer and say, how do you feel about this? And the buyer says, I'll make up the extra 1, or no, tell the seller I want him to pay 3, or my offer is going away.
What about previous contracts that were under contract prior to the August 6th date?
MLS
And-
is your guidance.
So the title company is asking for a form showing that
Yes.
oh, she's just asking you the same way they asked you before, what is your commission? They're asking you the same thing now. What are you receiving? And all you do is put in the listing brokerage is paying us the commission of this much. That's all you tell them. The same way you did before when you just said, I'm receiving this much per MLS. You're saying I'm receiving this much per the listing broker and what they offered.
No forms prior to August 6th. Okay. Go back to the agenda because a little more thing. What does Jeff say?
Well, Jeff has a question. What if there is or I think that was Rachel. What if there is a compensation offer of 1%? You have a BBA of 3%. Do you just write 2 in the contract itself or completely bypass the agreement and put in 3? So that's a negotiation point. If the compensation is for 1% and the seller is paying 1%, now when you write an offer, the agent has a compensation agreement that says 1%. You're giving me 1%. When I craft the offer, I have an agreement for 3% with my buyer, so I want to get the other 2 covered. So I write into the offer, the verbiage that we used here, seller to credit buyer 2% at 2% of the purchase price at closing to be used as buyer broker compensation, because they're going to credit the buyer the 2% difference and the buyer can now pay me the 2% difference. It's already in there. Every exact wording is in Dotloop under clauses. You don't need to come up with it. Go to clauses, the same place you get your transaction fee, the appraisal gap, all of that word. The exact verbiage is in Dotloop. Go to your clauses, it comes in.
So you actually have compensation from 2 different places. One, the seller's giving you 1%. One, the contract is requesting the other 2. And if it gets accepted, then that goes. If it's not, it's a negotiable term. Right? So it's a balance. I haven't had any new home builder issues yet.
What's the issue you're having with new home builders? They deal with the commission compensation at the time of contract. Yeah, then the builders understand their contract says what the compensation is going to be. It always has. So when their compensation agreement to you has always been in their contract, they're not doing anything different. They're just saying, yes, we're offering you this. And when your buyer writes a contract, it's going to be in there. And the same way before, when you were supposed to get a bonus and you said, hey, this is incorrect, can you change that so I can sign the correct one? You just tell them the same thing. This is what I have in writing from your builder. Probably get an email in writing stating what they're offering. That way you have it. But at the time of contract is when they address it. It's part of their contract forms. That's the way they've always done it. So
But
they're not
you are
creating
still limited by your BBA.
yeah, they're not doing it. They're not creating any problems. That's the way they've always done it. And they're just telling you, this is how we've always addressed it. We're not changing our policies because of that. We will address it at that time. I know, but they're telling you what they're, but this is the way they've always done it before in the contract, addressing compensation agreements in the contract. They're not doing anything different. So that's how they're going to do it. I understand what you're saying, but they're not going to change their policy and give you a form up front when they address that policy, that form in their contract. They're just saying, we're not changing our policies. That's how we've done it. I get it.
But they're going to send you a flyer in the email that says 3% plus a $5,000 bonus. Builders are saying it's on your website. That's on their website. That's a place. And we'll be able to say that soon too, when Jimmy figures it all out. He's working on it. All right. Show me more time. Okay. We just covered that. Listing agent should provide a compensation agreement. Listing agent needs to ask the buyer's agent what their BBA percentage before presenting any offers. All right. So you've got to know what their BBA limits are to present your offer to the seller. And if they're not playing that game with us, it's going to be a little bit more difficult. But how do they expect you to present an offer to the seller when you don't know how much the seller's going to pay commission? Or if the seller's paying commission? You just don't know. Okay. I'm not going to spend any more time on that. Thank you, Sam. Sammy is calling me a lot, saying, I got this. What do I do here? What do? And I think we should all say thank you to Sam for code. There you go, Sam. Resounding all over the place. And the rest of the back office. And that includes Chris and Jasmine and Angelique and everybody else is doing everything back there. Okay. Just jumping on mucks. I'm going to cover this stuff fast. Zillow market updates. It's not great. It's real quick though. I highlighted a couple things there. Number one. I didn't highlight all that. Go down. There you go. Typical U.S. home is worth $362,000 now. That typical mortgage payment, assuming a 20% down, is typically $1,900 a month now. Wow, that's a lot. When my pool man called me the other day. His girlfriend's looking for a place to rent for $1,200 a month. That's what I said. You know what I found? 190 units for rent, around $1,200 to $1,400 a month. Yeah, they were 400 square feet and they were condos that were 87 years old, but they were around there. So it was interesting. 26.2% of listings in July had a price cut. We haven't seen these things before. So we're getting back to the new normal. So don't feel bad, right? Real life real estate on Monday. Stephanie took that house from 269 to 159 and sold it at 165. That was a series of staged price reduction. And a condominium complex had 30 units for sale and had a doubling of their condo fees, which drastically affected the affordability of the unit, right? But that's a hard discussion to have with the seller, but they're off the hook now and it's closing this week. Interesting. They're saying a September rate cut from the Fed should be a done deal this month and in November too. ADUs, what's an ADU? Accessory dwelling unit. So there's a big push now because housing is getting so expensive that you could put an extra dwelling unit on your house so your kids can move in and your parents can move in with you on your property. So that's another opportunity for people to look.
Just make sure you check with your local municipality. Most all of them are allowing it, but there's strict restrictions on the size that it can be compared to the main house. And most of the municipalities are requiring the primary owner live in one of those two units in most of our areas.
Yeah.
Other states, they're allowing you to put one on, you can rent it out, do whatever, even if nobody lives in it. But all of our municipalities require that the primary owner live in one of either the main house or the ADU once it's built.
And you got electric meters potentially, you've got water meters, you've got sewer hookups, you've got all that other stuff that has to be considered in to the infrastructure of adding another dwelling unit. Okay. And that's what I found. Flex, I got a call yesterday from Zoo that today the loan officers for the Zillow home loans people want to do a meet and greet. So I sent that to the group. It's at 3 o'clock. If you can make it, please do. It won't take long, but I wish I had better notice. Listing agreement signed at 3% to each side, but compensation form is filled in as 2% after talking to the buyer's agent and knowing what his BBA was set at. Can't do that. Why did I put that in there?
We were talking about topics for this morning and it was just your BBA. I mean, your compensation agreement has to match your listing agreement. You can't just change the terms willy-nilly.
Your seller said,
on
Jim, I authorize you to offer 3% to tell the other side, I'm willing to pay them a 3% commission. Then your compensation agreement says 3%. Even if you know their BBA only says 2.5, right? The compensation agreement is, that's what I agreed to pay. You're limited by your BBA.
That was the issue that I have with a listing agent asking for your BBA first.
Yeah.
Technically, they're going in direct opposition of what their listing agreement possibly says. If their listing agreement says, I authorize you to offer 2, 2.5, or 3, and you are not offering that, are they doing right by the contract they have with the seller by making you show first what you are receiving, then they offer less than what the listing agreement says, even though their contract said they would do that. So that
We're not going to play those games.
that's yeah, we don't do that. We're not going to police that. We're not going to play those games, but that's the potential issue we run into, which is why we're not going to do those things.
So when our seller authorizes us to offer the buyer this much, that's how much our compensation is going to be for. Good. I'm real satisfied. These are great. And I'm not hunting for these. They go into a separate folder in my inbox, and I just clicked on the first one, and this is what I got. This is Sarah Shinneberry from Sun City. From the moment Sarah was recommended to us, I knew we would get our house sold. She immediately put us at ease and was incredibly knowledgeable, kind, hardworking, and has a great personality. Oh, her head's not going to fit through the door. Sarah goes 100% above and beyond for her clients. She's easy to speak with, makes sure you understand the process, and gives you as much peace of mind. She's quick to respond, another one, to questions, and very professional. She doesn't stop working until the job is done. Sarah deserves all the credit. She's the best. Highly recommend Sarah Shinneberry. 100%. Thank you, Sarah. You're a gem. Jimmy, what can we do with that information? You can share it. You can have a little tab on your Moxie website to put your real satisfied reviews on. So when your customers are researching you, which they're going to do, and they read things like that, it's not going to hurt, right? Find the other one while on that mode. That one. Joe Bookout. Joe's the guy who did 12 deals last month. Joe went above and beyond to make sure our home was ready for market. Joe helped us make sure selling our home from out of state was a seamless process and put in real work to make sure our home was sparkling and ready to show at all times. We would recommend it to anyone looking to sell in the Pensacola area. All right. Those are the little things that people just appreciate with us. It's fantastic. So take advantage of it. Managers have a call today. Is it today?
Yes, today
Yes.
too.
So Kate Rossi is the president of agent engagement for Anywhere, overseeing all the brands. And Joe has arranged, Joe knew her from Coldwell Banker days. Joe's arranged for her to come to a class for us privately.
Next Wednesday at 10 a.m. in South Tampa, and next Wednesday at 2 p.m. in Apollo Beach. So she'll be doing two classes, the same class, one in South Tampa, one in Apollo Beach. Next Wednesday, make a reservation to get to either one at 10 a.m. or 2, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, 10 or 2. So yeah, there it is. Make sure that you reserve one of those slots so you can come and listen to her speak. It's a great,
We're not sure if she's going to Zoom it or not. If she does,
But she's not. We may try to Zoom
We're gonna
it,
try to
but
get it
as of
Zoom,
right
maybe.
now, it's in person and it's on the calendar. So look at your calendar and you'll actually see it called out so you know where and when.
But I'll tell you, to get that perspective from a president of agent engagement for the whole Anywhere brand, like I've got a call tomorrow with the top 100 brokers for FAR, because we're one of the top 100 brokerages with FAR. Do you think it makes sense for me to tune in and hear what they have to say? It makes sense for us to tune in and see what these things have to say too. Great, it's all there for us. Stellar's giving great information, FAR is giving great information, and NAR is giving great information. Okay. Why did I do that one? Go down. I think there's an attachment I wanted to show. Compensation agreement. Yeah, this is the one. Okay. Buyer's broker compensation. If buyer's broker is the procuring cause of the property, seller will compensate buyer's broker as stated below. They're going to give the buyer's broker 2.5% plus $695. What is that? So the seller is going to give the buyer broker 2.5% plus $695.
Do you think they meant to do that?
So this broker, this agent works for Robert Slack, which is one of those 100% companies, which is huge. It does have a lot of involvement. And that's his desk fee monthly. So he's asking the seller to pay his desk fee. Why would the seller do that? But this is his buyer broker agreement that they're going to pay us 2.5% plus $695. That's not what he intended to do, but he did it. Yes. So he's going to pay us more than the commission we asked for.
Well, I'm curious if this, because this looks like it was an offer sent. Please, this is a buyer agent submitting an offer. His buyer brokerage agreement says 2.5% plus a $695 fee to his buyer. So he's asking for that from the seller, 2.5%.
Yeah.
The seller provide this. The buyer agent is asking for this via the compensation agreement. This is what he submitted. So what's the issue here?
This is
I'm
why
s-
we're saying be careful of what you're receiving.
They're sending us a compensation agreement from the buyer side saying, Mr. Seller, this is what I want you to pay me. And they're sending a sales contract that the buyer has already signed. The seller can sign this sales contract and not pay any of the commissions unless he wrote it into the additional terms.
Is that
So he
compensation?
did check other for compensation agreement, but this compensation agreement isn't between buyer and seller. So
Doesn't belong there.
it just gets confusing now.
On this contract, roll up to the closing cost, seller's closing cost. I think it's page 4. Because look what else he did. And you guys got to pay attention to this. He put it in there too. So closing cost to be paid by seller, he wrote it in there. He's asking the seller to pay his $6.95 fee.
So technically he could receive 2.5% plus 695
Plus $6.95.
plus another 695 because it's listed in a separate place as a separate cost that he's asking the seller to pay.
And you can simply strike that through and initial it and say no. Right? I think it's deliberate.
It's ignorant deliberance or deliberate ignorance. That's what I was gonna say. Ignorant deliberate ignorance. They're just doing what sometimes they're just making stuff up. Hey, I'll do this, and I'll put this here and send it over.
But Chris and I went through this trying to put the MLS fee in there because some people ask for MLS fees. There's no real easy way to request an MLS fee in the compensation agreement. You'd have to put in additional terms. So we're not gonna mess with that right now. Just pay attention to Jimmy's real satisfied added to your Moxie presentation. That's really there. I hope you guys take advantage of it. Oh, Jody Myers. Oh, yeah. Okay. So once again, we're talking about Century 21 and their infinite wisdom. This is Jody saying, hey guys, we're doing this stuff for you. Please share it with your agent. So I'm forwarding this on to you because I don't know what mail you're checking or not. But this is every 2 weeks, they're sending out an Agent Edge newsletter, which I know we get a lot of newsletters to read, but it's not bad to at least skim it. Scroll down a little bit and just see, because they've got, registration for people to talk to, and they got little articles you can read, and it's just stuff. There's our director of training. Wendy was here not too long ago with us. It's just, they're making a point to give us more valuable information. So we owe it to them to kind of read it. And then last week, Devin Weiser, and there's a group of people in South Tampa. It's called the Best of Tampa. And we had a lot of agents register, but the office actually won. So Central Elizabeth Beggars was listed one of the best places, not places to work, one of the best real estate companies in Tampa. So it's a little recognition for us. So it's not bad. Thank you, Devin.
Those are all the stars.
Yep. Now we're in birthdays and I'll be done. All right. So yesterday, Carrie Chalmers from Palm Beach. Have you seen her name on the hot sheet at all? She's the agent that owns the RV resort, the Cabo something RV resort over on the East Coast. And she's selling a lot of those units. If you haven't seen the Moxie website, you've got it on your website. It's a damn cool place. Lazy rivers and all kinds of cool stuff, and they're selling. So happy birthday to Carrie. Annette Nieves from BE3 Pasco today. Tomorrow, Lee Gregory from Sun City, Scott Moon from BE3 Emerald Coast, Rich Brooks from BE3 Orlando, Trisha White from Madeira Beach on the 22nd with Kara Schwind. There you go. And Destiny Johnson from the Roman Group and Shane Crawford from Madeira Beach on the 25th. And I'm 11 minutes over today. But that was an important conversation to have, right? Because we're still getting these questions. And the more we go over them, the better we're going to get.
So question, so if the buyer's agent requires that the compensation agreement is checked as other in the contract, even though we know that it doesn't belong there and won't budge, what then? Communication.
Yeah.
I mean, look, we're all trying to negotiate something, so communicate. How can we get this done more clearly? Can we remove the compensation agreement or negotiate that separately? Let's negotiate that right now and discuss that. If we're offering compensation, our listing agreement says you authorize us to offer the compensation. So give them a compensation agreement at what you're offering. This is what we are offering. I see you made that request, but this is what we're offering. This is what the seller will sign. If you want anything else, address it in the contract as an additional cost. We will negotiate that in the contract, but please remove it from additional terms. Or please remove it from checking the other box.
Yep.
Just communicate. Pick up the phone, call. Let's figure out how to get it done.
And once again, ask them what their limitations are on their own personal BBA. Because a lot of you guys are offering 2.5 or 3%. They may not be strong enough to ask for 2.5 or 3%. So your seller won't be obligated to pay them that amount of money, which would make their offer more attractive if the seller had to pay less. So keep that in mind.
Jeff, what do you got?
Oh, I just reminding everybody Thursday in this room, 6 o'clock, Beachmaker, live overview and Q&A. So can't make it a whole lot simpler for you guys. So share it, post it, be out there and just come and learn, guys. It is a pretty simple sale for you. And I think we got 4 of them going down this week already. So people are loving them, they're buying them, and there's a lot of money there for you. So show up Thursday at 6.
2.75%. When's the commission paid, Jeff?
You get half of it when we break ground in Q1 and the other half when we finish the
you go.
project. So a couple years. So spread it out this week. Spend it all at one time.
I like what Jeff said. If you set them up, I'll knock them down. Just bring
Bring
them
'em.
there. Cool. All right, guys. Happy Tuesday, and enjoy your individual office meetings.